I never meant to marry a ghost. That's what he was when I found him, curled against the alley wall behind the diner where I washed blood and grease from plates for $8 an hour. Rain hammered the dumpsters, and the city smelled like wet cardboard and gunpowder that hadn't decided whether to fire yet. He was barefoot, shirt torn, face bruised so badly I thought the shadows had eaten half of it. His eyes, though, those eyes were open, watching me like he already knew every secret I'd buried under 6 years of running. I should have kept walking. Instead, I crouched, offered him the half sandwich I hadn't eaten because my stomach was too knotted with hunger to accept kindness, and said, "You'll die out here tonight." He took the sandwich with fingers that didn't shake. Then he spoke, voice raw but steady, like a man who'd already accepted death and was only waiting for the paperwork. "Death would be quieter," he said. Something in the way he said it made my ribs ache. I recognized the sound of a person who had nothing left to lose because everything had already been taken. I knew that sound intimately, so I did the stupidest thing I've ever done. I brought him home. My apartment was a single room above a pawn shop that sold more guns than jewelry. One window, one lock that barely worked, one mattress on the floor. I gave him the mattress. I took the chair. In the morning, he was still there, watching me make coffee with the kind of silence that feels heavier than screaming. His name, he said, was Luca. Just Luca. He never asked my name. He already knew it. I saw it in the flicker of recognition when I told him Mara like it was a confession. He repeated it once, tasting the syllables, then never said it again for weeks, like he was saving it for something worse. I told myself I was being charitable. I told myself he was harmless. I told myself a lot of lies that first month. He healed too fast. Bruises faded overnight. Cuts sealed without scarring. The only thing that didn't heal was the look in his eyes, like a wolf that had learned to walk on 2 legs and wear the skin of a man, but still remembered the taste of throats. He started paying for things. First it was groceries that appeared on the table while I was at work. Then rent, 3 months in crisp hundreds slid under the landlord's door. Then the locks on my apartment changed while I was in the shower, and the new key was already on a silver chain around my neck when I stepped out dripping. I asked where the money came from. He looked at me for a long time, water still sliding down my collarbone, and said, "You don't want to know." I should have run right then. But I was tired. 6 years of looking over my shoulder, of sleeping with a knife under my pillow, of knowing the past was a bullet with my name on it that just hadn't found me yet. Luca made the world quiet. When he was in the room, no one knocked on my door at 3 a.m. No one followed me home from the late shift. The city held its breath around him, so I stayed. We lived like 2 ghosts haunting the same grave. We didn't speak much. When we did, it was about nothing. Weather, the best way to brew coffee, the fact that I hated jazz, but he played it anyway on a cracked radio he'd found in the trash. He never touched me. Not once. Not even when I woke screaming from dreams I refused to name, and he stood in the doorway like a sentinel made of night. Then came the night everything cracked open. I came home early because the diner had closed after a shooting in the parking lot. 2 gangs, wrong colors, wrong corner. I was shaking, adrenaline and terror making my teeth chatter. Luca was at the table, sleeves rolled up, cleaning a gun the way other people fold laundry. Slow, methodical, loving. He didn't look surprised to see me. I stared at the disassembled Beretta, at the oil on his fingertips, at the scars that ran like white rivers up his forearms. Scars I'd pretended were from some long-ago accident. "Who are you?" I whispered. He clicked the slide back into place with a sound like a judge's gavel. "You already know," he said. I backed up until the door handle bruised my spine. "Say it." He stood, slowly. The room shrank around him. He was taller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just smaller now. "I'm the man your father sold you to when you were 16, he said. "The man you ran from the night you slit your bodyguard's throat and disappeared. The man whose ring you're still wearing on that chain around your neck like a noose." My knees gave out. I hadn't known I was still wearing the ring. I'd told myself I kept it to remember what I'd escaped. But my fingers found the thin gold band under my shirt, warm from my skin, and I wanted to vomit. Luca crossed the room. He didn't help me up. He crouched so we were eye to eye, and the monster I'd been hiding from for 6 years finally had a face. "I looked for you, Mara," he said softly. "Every day for 6 years. And then one night you found me bleeding in an alley like some stray dog, and you brought me home." His fingers brushed the ring through my shirt. Not gentle, possessive. "You married me the day you put that key around your neck," he said. "You just didn't know it yet." I couldn't breathe. He leaned closer, lips almost touching my ear. "Welcome home, wife." Before we continue the story, please drop a comment telling me where you're watching this from, and don't forget to subscribe to Mara's Betrayal. I still remember the first time he kissed me. Not the night he told me who he was. That night he left me on the floor and slept in the chair like nothing had changed. It was 3 nights later. I hadn't left the apartment. Couldn't. My legs wouldn't hold me when I tried the door. Luca came and went like smoke, sometimes gone for hours, sometimes watching me from the shadows with that unreadable stare. He brought food I didn't eat. He cleaned the gun again. He waited. On the 3rd night, I stood in the shower until the water went cold, trying to scrub his words off my skin. When I stepped out, he was there, blocking the doorway. Shirt unbuttoned, scars silver in the weak light. Water dripped from my hair onto the tile between us. I waited for him to speak. He didn't. He just looked at me like I was the only real thing left in his world. Then he kissed me. It wasn't soft. It wasn't asking permission. It was punishment and apology and starvation all at once. His hand fisted in my wet hair, arching my neck back until it hurt, and his mouth took mine like he'd been starving for 6 years, and I was the first meal he'd been allowed. I tasted blood, mine or his, I didn't know, and when I tried to push him away, my palms slid on the slick muscle of his chest and came away red. He pulled back just enough to speak against my lips. "You ran," he said. "You don't get to run again." Then he kissed me harder. I should have fought. Instead, I kissed him back like I was trying to drown. When he finally let me breathe, my lip was split and his eyes were black with something that wasn't quite sanity. "Pack a bag," he said. "We're leaving the city tonight." I laughed. It sounded broken. "Where exactly do you think I can go that you won't find me?" He smiled then. The first real smile I'd ever seen on him, and it was terrifying. "Nowhere," he said. "That's the point." We left the city in a black car that smelled of leather and gun oil. Luca drove. I sat in the passenger seat with my wrists zip-tied to the door handle because I'd tried to jump out at the first red light. My cheek still stung from where he'd backhanded me, not hard enough to bruise, just hard enough to remind me who decided whence a game ended. He didn't speak for 3 hours. I watched the skyline shrink in the side mirror until it was gone, like a mouth closing behind us. My phone had died somewhere between the apartment and the car. He'd taken the battery out while I was still screaming. The radio played nothing but static. Every mile felt like another stitch sewing me into a shroud. Eventually the road narrowed, trees crowding in until the headlights carved tunnels through the dark. I recognized none of it. I hadn't been this far north since I was 16, since the night I'd crawled out a bathroom window with a razor blade between my teeth and blood on my wedding dress. I must have fallen asleep because I woke with my face pressed to cold glass and Luca's hand on my thigh. Not sexual, just a weight that said mine. We were parked outside a house that didn't belong in this century. Stone and iron and windows like blind eyes. No lights, no neighbors, just forest breathing down the walls. Luca cut the zip ties with a knife that appeared from nowhere. The blade kissed my skin, left a thin red smile across both wrists. "Walk," he said. I walked. Inside smelled of cedar and old money and something metallic underneath. My bare feet stuck to the marble. He hadn't let me put shoes on. Every step echoed like a countdown. He didn't turn on the lights. He didn't need to. Moonlight spilled through tall windows and painted everything corpse pale. Portraits watched us, men with Luca's cheekbones and eyes like winter graves. I wondered which one was his father. I wondered if any of them had ever smiled. He stopped in the middle of a foyer big enough to swallow my entire apartment building. "Welcome to the house you were supposed to die in," he said. My stomach dropped through the floor. He watched the realization hit me. "You remember," he murmured. "Good." I did remember. The marriage contract signed in my father's study when I was 15. The ceremony scheduled for my 16th birthday. The stories whispered about the Rossi family, how they buried traitors alive, how they kept the skulls of their enemies in the wine cellar, how the youngest son had vanished years ago and no one dared speak his name. Luca Rossi, the ghost prince of the Rossi Empire, reported dead in a car bomb when he was 22. I laughed until I gagged. "You let them think you were dead," I said. "All this time." "I was dead," he answered. "Until you fed me half a sandwich and dragged me back into hell." He took my elbow, gentle this time, almost tender, and steered me up a staircase that curved like a spine. My legs shook so badly I had to grip the banister. At the top, he opened a door I recognized from nightmares. My wedding suite, white silk wallpaper, a 4-poster bed big enough for rituals, French doors that opened onto a balcony where I'd once stood the night before the ceremony, calculating how many bones I'd break if I jumped. Nothing had changed. Not the lace curtains. Not the crystal decanters on the dresser. Not the faint brown stain on the carpet where I'd dropped a glass of drugged champagne the night I ran. Luca closed the door behind us. The click of the lock sounded final. I backed away until the bed hit my knees. He didn't move closer, just watched me with that terrible patience. "I looked for you," he said again, softer. "I tore the country apart. I killed men for saying your name wrong. I burned cities looking for a girl with storm-colored eyes, and a scar on her left shoulder blade shaped like a crescent moon. His gaze dropped to my shirt, to the place where the scar hid. "I thought you were dead too," he said, "until I saw you in that alley, until I realized God had a sense of humor after all." I found my voice. "You could have told me. Would you have come quietly?" "No." Then I chose correctly. He crossed the room in 3 strides and opened a wardrobe. Inside hung the dress. My wedding dress, still pristine, still waiting. He pulled it out like a mortician unveiling a corpse. "You'll wear it tomorrow," he said. I stared at the miles of white lace and seed pearls and felt my soul try to crawl out of my mouth. "You're insane," I whispered. "No," he said. "I'm patient." He laid the dress across the bed like an offering, then walked to the door. "Sleep, Mara. Tomorrow you become my wife. For real this time." He left me there with the ghost of who I used to be. I didn't sleep. I sat on the balcony until dawn, chain-smoking cigarettes I found in a drawer that still had my teenage lipstick prints on the filters. The grounds stretched dark and endless. No gates I could see, just forest and silence, and the distant howl of dogs that sounded too human. When the sun came up, 2 women entered without knocking. Older, silent, dressed in black like mourners. They bathed me, oiled my skin, painted my face until I looked 16 again. When they lifted the dress over my head, the lace scratched like teeth. I didn't fight them. There was no point. They walked me downstairs barefoot, veil trailing like a surrender flag. The house was full of people now, men in suits that cost more than my life, women with diamonds sharp enough to cut throats. They watched me descend the stairs the way people watch a lamb being led to the altar. Luca waited at the bottom. He wore black. No tie. Shirt open at the throat, revealing the scar where someone had once tried to carve his heart out and failed. His eyes never left mine. When I reached him, he took my hand and slid the ring onto my finger himself. The same ring I'd worn on a chain for 6 years. It fit perfectly. It always had. The priest was already bleeding from the nose. Someone's warning, maybe. He spoke the words fast, voice shaking. Luca's answers were calm. Mine were silence. When it was time for the kiss, Luca cupped my face like I was made of glass and kissed me like he was trying to swallow my soul. The room erupted in cheers and gunfire outside. Celebratory, they said. Later, when they brought the cake, I saw the first crack in the mask. Luca fed me a piece with his own fingers. I bit him hard enough to draw blood. He smiled like I'd given him a gift. If you're still watching the story till now, drop a comment so I know you're with me. That night he carried me back to the bedroom, bridal style, because some traditions die harder than people. The door shut. The lock clicked. The veil came off like a skin. I waited for him to take what he'd waited 6 years for. He didn't. He sat in a chair across the room and watched me undress with the same expression he'd worn cleaning that gun. Slow, methodical, loving. When I stood in nothing but bruises and terror, he finally spoke. "You think I want your body?" he asked. "I've had 6 years to imagine that. I want something worse." He stood and crossed the room until we were breathing the same air. "I want your forgiveness," he said, "and I'm willing to break the world to get it." Then he walked out and left me naked and shaking in a wedding dress that smelled like grave flowers. I didn't see him for 3 days. They brought me meals I didn't eat. They took the plates away untouched. On the 4th day, I tried the balcony again. Third floor, no trellis, just stone and a 50-foot drop. A man stepped out of the shadows with a rifle and shook his head once. Message received. On the 7th day, the door opened and Luca walked in carrying a small wooden box. He set it on the bed. "Open it," he said. I did. Inside was a finger. Male, still wearing a college ring. My stomach lurched. "His name was Marco," Luca said conversationally. "He was the bodyguard you stabbed in the femoral artery the night you ran. He lived, by the way. For a while. He told everyone you were dead. I believed him." Luca sat on the edge of the bed. "I found him last week. He cried when I reminded him of your name. He begged me not to kill him. I told him I wouldn't." He met my eyes. "I lied." I stared at the finger until it blurred. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you need to understand the rules now, Mara." His voice was gentle, almost kind. "There is no outside anymore. There is no running. There is only me. And if you ever try to leave again, I won't chase you." He leaned in until his lips brushed my ear. "I'll burn every place you might hide. I'll kill every person who ever looked at you twice. I'll make the world so small, the only safe place left will be the shadow I cast." Then he kissed my temple like a benediction and walked out. That was the night I started planning. Not to escape. To kill him. I learned the house the way a prisoner learns the veins in the walls. There are 73 steps from the bridal suite to the kitchen if you take the servants' stairs. The third step from the bottom creaks like a dying man. The pantry has a false back panel that leads to the old bootlegger tunnels. The guards change shifts at 4:17 a.m. exactly, because the man who smokes Camels is always late coming back from his break. The dogs are fed raw meat at dawn and sleep heaviest at dusk. I learned Luca, too. He never slept more than 3 hours. He took his coffee black with 2 sugars at 5:30 sharp. He showered with the door unlocked. Arrogance or invitation, I hadn't decided. He read Machiavelli in the original Italian and underlined passages about fear and love with a fountain pen that cost more than my mother's funeral. He never touched me again after that first wedding night. Not once. He looked, though. God, he looked. Every morning he came to the room with a tray. Eggs, toast, orange juice in a crystal glass. He set it on the table, watched me pretend to eat, then left. At night he returned, stood in the doorway until I climbed into bed, then locked me in from the outside, like a child, afraid of the dark. I waited for the monster to get bored. Monsters always do, but Luca wasn't bored. He was patient. On the 22nd day, he brought me a gift. A knife. Small, pearl handle. My initials carved into the blade. M.R. He laid it on the breakfast tray next to the rose. "For protection," he said. I stared at him. He smiled like he could read every thought screaming through my skull. "You're my wife," he said. "No one here would dare touch you. But if they did," he tapped the knife, "I'd want you to have something pretty to gut them with." Then he left. I hid the knife in the lining of the mattress. That night I dreamed of Marco's finger and woke up tasting blood. Mine. I'd bitten my tongue so hard it split. The next morning Luca noticed. He touched the corner of my mouth with his thumb, came away red, and licked it clean without breaking eye contact. "You're wasting away," he said. "Eat." I ate. He watched every bite like it was communion. After that, he started bringing me books, first editions, poetry, true crime. A leather-bound copy of Medea with annotations in his handwriting. He'd underlined every line about children dying for revenge. I read them all. I started speaking again, too. Not much, just enough to keep him off balance. I asked questions. Why did you really fake your death? Because my father tried to kill me first. Who won? I'm breathing. He isn't. Simple. Clean. Terrifying. I asked about the bomb. He told me the truth. He'd built it himself, planted it under his own car, walked away before it blew. The family needed a ghost to fear. He gave them one. I asked why he wanted me. He looked at me for so long, I thought he wouldn't answer. Because you're the only person who ever looked at me and saw the devil, he said, and still offered me half a sandwich. Then he left before I could decide if that was love or insanity. On the 40th day, the power went out. Storm. Lightning cracked the sky open like God was trying to get in. The generator failed. For 12 minutes, the house was blind. I used those 12 minutes. I took the knife, pried open the false panel in the pantry, and crawled into the tunnels on my hands and knees. Mud and rat shit and the smell of old whiskey. I counted turns the way I'd counted steps. Left, right, left, straight for 100 paces. I found the exit behind a rusted iron gate half buried in ivy. I was 10 feet from freedom when the lights came back on. Luca was waiting at the other side of the gate. Rain poured down his face like tears he'd never cry. He held an umbrella he wasn't using. His shirt stuck to every muscle, every scar. In his other hand was a gun pointed at my forehead through the bars. I froze. He didn't speak. He just looked at me. Disappointment, fury, something darker. Then he lowered the gun and opened the gate. I didn't run. He stepped forward until the muzzle pressed cold against my temple. "Try again," he whispered. Then he kissed me in the rain like the world was ending. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. I couldn't tell if it was rain or something else. He carried me back inside. That night, he chained me to the bed. Not wrists, ankle. A thin silver chain long enough to reach the bathroom, but not the door. He locked it himself, kissed the key, and swallowed it. "I'm tired of games, Mara," he said. He left the light on. I didn't sleep. At 3:07 a.m., the door opened again. Not Luca. A woman. Young. Beautiful. Terrified. She wore a maid's uniform and carried a tray with a single glass of water and 2 pills. "For the pain," she whispered. I stared at her. She glanced at the chain, then at the door. "I can help you," she said so quietly I almost missed it. I didn't move. She set the tray down and reached into her pocket. A key. Small. Silver. Identical to the one Luca had swallowed. She pressed it into my hand. "Tomorrow night," she breathed. "During the party. Everyone will be drunk. I'll leave the East Wing unguarded." Then she was gone. I hid the key inside my mouth until morning. When Luca came with breakfast, I smiled at him for the first time since the wedding. He froze in the doorway. "What?" he asked, suspicious. "Nothing," I said. "Just happy to see my husband." He stared at me for a long time. Then he smiled back. Slow, sharp, beautiful. "Liar," he said. But he unchained my ankle anyway. That night I dreamed of Marco's finger again. Only this time it wasn't Marco's. It was the maid's. I woke up screaming. Luca was already there, sitting on the edge of the bed, stroking my hair like I was a spooked horse. "Shh," he murmured. "It's just a dream." I turned my face into his thigh and cried until I couldn't breathe. He held me until dawn. The party was for his birthday. 43 guests. All men who'd once sworn loyalty to his dead father. All men who'd celebrated when the car bomb took the prodigal son. They drank his wine. They ate his food. They toasted his resurrection like it was a miracle instead of a nightmare. I wore red. Luca had chosen the dress himself, blood silk, backless, slit to the thigh. The neckline plunged low enough to show the scar between my breasts where my father's ring had hung for 6 years. He couldn't take his eyes off me. Neither could anyone else. I smiled at them all. I danced with monsters who'd once bid on my virginity like it was livestock. I let them touch my waist, my hair, my throat. Every time one of them did, Luca's hand tightened on his glass until I thought it would shatter. At midnight, the lights dimmed for the fireworks. That was my cue. I slipped away from the crowd, heels silent on marble, heart hammering so loud I was sure he'd hear it. The east wing was dark. The maid was waiting. She grabbed my hand and pulled me toward a side door that led to the garage. "Hurry," she whispered. "The car's running." A gunshot. Close. The maid jerked, blood blooming across her chest like a rose. She looked down at it, surprised. Then she looked at me. "I'm sorry," she said, and fell. Luca stepped out of the shadows. He held the gun loose at his side, barrel still smoking. He looked at the maid, then at me. Then he smiled. "Happy birthday to me," he said. He walked forward slowly. I backed up until the wall kissed my spine. He stopped an inch away, reached into my mouth, gentle, almost loving, and pulled out the key I'd hidden under my tongue. He held it up between us. "You swallowed the wrong one," he said. Then he kissed me with the taste of gunpowder and betrayal on his tongue. When he pulled back, his eyes were shining. "You almost made it," he whispered. "I'm so proud." He lifted me into his arms like a bride again, carried me past the dying maid, past the party that had gone silent, up the stairs, into our room. He laid me on the bed and chained both ankles this time. Then he sat beside me and stroked my hair until I stopped shaking. "You keep trying to leave," he said softly, "but you forget. I'm the only place you've ever been safe." He kissed my forehead. "Sleep, wife. Tomorrow we try again." I closed my eyes and started planning something worse than escape. I stopped trying to leave. Not because I accepted the cage, because I finally understood the game wasn't about doors. It was about him. Luca wanted me broken in a very specific way. Not screaming, not bleeding, not even hating him. He wanted me to choose the cage, to walk in, lock it myself, and hand him the key with a smile. That was the only victory he hadn't tasted yet. So I gave him something better. I gave him hope. The morning after the party, after the maid's body had been quietly removed and the blood scrubbed from the marble like it never existed, I asked him for a garden. "Just a small one," I said, voice soft, eyes down. "Flowers. Dirt under my nails. Something alive that isn't afraid of me." He stared at me for so long I felt the weight of every corpse he'd ever buried. Then he nodded once. They gave me the old greenhouse on the west side of the estate. Glass fogged with age, iron bones rusted, floor choked with dead vines. No one had entered it since his mother died. The door creaked like a scream once he opened it for me. I spent 3 days on my knees in the dirt, barefoot, hair twisted up with a pencil, letting the sun burn my shoulders raw. I planted night-blooming jasmine, black calla lilies, foxglove, monkshood, poison in pretty packages. Luca watched from the doorway every afternoon. He never came inside. On the 4th day, I asked for a knife to prune the roses. He brought me the pearl-handled one. I smiled like I'd won a war. That night, I cut my own arm open in the shower. Not deep, just enough for blood to sheet down the drain in perfect crimson ribbons. Then I walked naked and dripping into the bedroom where he sat reading. He looked up. The book fell out of his hands. I stood there letting him see the new scar forming beside the old ones. "I can't feel anything anymore," I whispered. "Make me feel." Something cracked behind his eyes. He crossed the room in 2 strides, lifted me like I weighed nothing, and carried me to the bed. His mouth was on the cut before I could breathe, tongue tracing the wound, tasting copper and madness. I arched into him, fingers in his hair, and for the first time since the wedding night, I let him touch me everywhere. He was shaking, not with lust, with terror. I kissed him until he forgot how to be afraid. Afterward, he held me like I was the last real thing in his world, and whispered my name against my throat like a prayer. I waited until his breathing evened out. Then I reached under the pillow, pulled out the pearl knife, and pressed it to the pulse in his neck. He didn't flinch. He opened his eyes and looked at me. "Do it," he said. I pressed harder. A bead of blood welled, perfect and bright. He smiled. "But you won't," he said, "because you need me alive to hate me properly." I screamed and threw the knife across the room. It buried itself in the wall, inches from his head. He laughed, soft, broken, relieved, and pulled me down into his arms again. That was the night I realized I was losing. Not to him, to myself. Because he was right. I needed him breathing. I started sleeping in his bed. Not because he forced me, because I started walking there on my own after the nightmares came. I'd crawl under the covers and press my face to his back and listen to his heartbeat until the screaming in my head quieted. He never commented on it. He just shifted to make room. Some nights I woke to find him watching me, fingers tracing the scars on my shoulder blades like he was reading Braille. "What do they say?" I asked once, half asleep. "That you survived me once," he answered. "They're wrong." I started cooking. Small things at first. Coffee exactly how he liked it. Eggs over easy with cracked pepper in the shape of a crescent moon. Then real meals. Pasta carbonara the way his mother used to make it. I found the recipe in her old journal hidden behind cookbooks no one had touched in 15 years. He ate like a man who'd forgotten food could be love. After dinner, we sat on the balcony and smoked his cigarettes and watched the stars die one by one. He told me things he'd never told anyone. How his father used to lock him in the wine cellar for days when he cried. How his older brother held him down while their uncle branded the Rossi crest into his back. How he killed his first man at 13, a traitor who'd raped one of the maids and slept like a baby afterward. I told him things too. How my father sold me to pay a debt he couldn't cover with money. How the bodyguard Marco used to touch me when no one was looking and whisper that one day I'd thank him. How I practiced smiling in the mirror so no one would see me break. We were 2 broken clocks that had finally found the same wrong time. One night he came home covered in someone else's blood. Not a drop of it his. He stood in the bedroom doorway dripping on the carpet and looked at me like he was waiting for judgment. I walked over, unbuttoned his shirt, peeled it off his skin. The body underneath was a map of violence. Bullet wounds, knife scars, burns shaped like cigars. I kissed everyone. Then I took him to the shower and washed the death off him with my own hands. When we were clean, I pushed him against the tile and knelt. He came with my name in his mouth like a wound. Afterward, he carried me to bed and held me so tight I felt my bones creak. "Don't leave me," he whispered into my hair, "not even when I deserve it." I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I was starting to forget why I ever wanted to. The garden bloomed black and purple and poisonous. I spent hours there every day, hands in the dirt, whispering to plants that could kill a man in minutes. Luca built me a bench under the jasmine. He sat there sometimes and watched me work. One afternoon, he brought me a small wooden box. Inside was a ring, not the old one. This one was platinum, set with a single black diamond. He knelt in the dirt like a supplicant. "Marry me again," he said. "Not because they made you, not because I took you, because you want to." I stared at him covered in soil and sunlight and sins, and felt something inside me crack wide open. I should have said no. I should have taken the trowel and buried it in his throat. Instead, I said, yes. He slid the ring on my finger like he was afraid I'd vanish. Then he kissed me in the poison garden like we weren't both damned. That night, I poisoned his wine. Just a little. Foxglove. Enough to slow the heart, blur the vision, make him think he was dying. I sat beside him on the bed and watched his pupils blow wide. He knew. Of course he knew. He smiled through blue lips. "Finally," he rasped. "Do it." I leaned down and kissed him, tasted death on his tongue. Then I took the antidote from my mouth, hidden under my tongue all evening, and fed it to him like communion. He choked, convulsed, clung to me like I was salvation. When the color came back to his face, he looked at me with something worse than love. Worship. "You saved me," he whispered. "No," I said. "I just proved you'll never leave me either." He laughed until he cried. Then he made love to me like a man saying thank you to God for damnation. The next morning he burned the old wedding dress in the fireplace. We watched it curl and blacken and turn to ash. He held my hand the whole time. After that, the chains stayed off. The guards stopped following me. I could walk the grounds whenever I wanted. I could leave. He never said it. He didn't have to. I was free. And I stayed. Because the truth, the ugly, rotting truth, was that I had become the thing I feared most. I had fallen in love with the monster. Not despite what he was. Because of it. Because he was the only person who saw every fractured piece of me and still wanted to keep them. Because when he said forever, he meant it in blood. Because I was tired of running. Because the garden was blooming. Because some cages are gilded with teeth and we learn to call them home. But love, real love, is a blade with two edges. And I still had one secret left. One that would destroy us both. I waited until the night of the new moon. No light, no witnesses. I led him to the greenhouse blindfolded. "A game," I said. He let me. He always let me now. I tied his hands with silk rope from the curtains, knelt him in the dirt among the monkshood, kissed him until he was trembling. Then I told him, "I'm pregnant," I said. He went still, absolutely perfectly still. Then he laughed, wild, broken, ecstatic, and tried to pull me into his arms even with his hands bound. I pressed the pearl knife to his throat. "There's more," I said. He stopped laughing. I leaned in until my lips brushed his ear. "It might not be yours." The silence that followed was worse than any scream. The greenhouse was so quiet, I could hear the monkshood breathing. Luca didn't move. not even when the blade kissed a second bead of blood from his throat. I waited for rage. I waited for him to snap the silk rope and strangle me with it right there between the poison and the jasmine. Instead, he started to smile. Slow. Terrible. Like a man who had just been handed the keys to hell and found they fit his own lock perfectly. "Say it again," he whispered. I pressed the knife deeper. "I said it might not be yours." He tilted his head back, offering more throat, eyes shining black in the dark. "How long have you known?" 2 weeks. "And you waited until now, until I was on my knees, blindfolded, helpless, to tell me." "Yes," he laughed. The sound ricocheted off the glass like bullets. Then he leaned forward until the blade sliced a clean red line across his skin, and his lips found mine. He kissed me like a drowning man kisses the sea that kills him. When he pulled back, his mouth was crimson. "Untie me," he said. I didn't. He didn't ask again. He simply waited. I hated how beautiful he looked. Kneeling in the dirt, blood on his neck, blindfold still in place, wrists bound, and still the most dangerous thing alive. I hated that I had done this to him. I hated that I loved it. I cut the rope. He didn't lunge, didn't strike. He simply rose to his feet, pulled the blindfold off, and looked at me like I was the first sunrise after an endless war. Then he walked out of the greenhouse without a word. I didn't follow. I sat in the dirt until dawn, surrounded by flowers that could stop a heart, and tried to remember how to pray. He didn't come to bed that night, or the next, or the next. The house went quiet in the way only a house full of killers can. Silent, watchful, waiting for blood. I walked the halls like a ghost. No one stopped me. No one looked at me. They looked through me. On the 4th night, I found him in his father's old study. He sat behind the desk that had once belonged to the man who tried to murder him. Shirt unbuttoned, glass of something dark in his hand, staring at a photograph I couldn't see. The room smelled like gun oil and grief. I closed the door. He didn't look up. I walked until I stood across from him. Only then did I see the photograph. It was me, 16 years old, wedding dress, eyes already dead. Next to it was an ultrasound printout, small, grainy, a smudge that might become a person. He had been staring at both for days. I waited. Finally, he spoke, voice raw. "Who?" I told him the truth. There had been one night, 3 months before the alley, before the sandwich, before I ever knew he was alive. A man in a bar in New Orleans. I was drunk on cheap bourbon and the illusion of freedom. He was kind. He had green eyes and a laugh that didn't sound like violence. We used protection. It failed. I didn't know until after I'd already dragged a bleeding ghost home and called him Luca. I told him all of it. When I finished, the silence was worse than screaming. He picked up the ultrasound and folded it with fingers that didn't shake. Then he looked at me. "Doesn't matter," he said. I blinked. He stood, rounded the desk, and dropped to his knees in front of me. Both hands on my stomach, gentle, reverent. "This child is mine," he said. "Because you are mine. Because I say so. Because if the world tries to say different, I will burn it down until the only story left is the one I write." He pressed his forehead to my belly. "I already love it," he whispered. "I already love you more than God allows." Then he cried. Luca Rossi, the man who had carved his name into the city with blood and fire, cried like a child against the place where another man's mistake was growing. I stood frozen. Then my fingers found his hair. I held him while he broke, After that, everything changed. He moved my things into the master bedroom, the one that had belonged to his parents, the one where his father used to beat him with a belt until he stopped crying. He burned the old bed, bought a new one big enough for a family. He had the nursery painted the color of storm clouds. He stopped leaving the house at night. He started reading baby books in Italian and underlining passages about love. He touched my stomach every morning and every night like he was greeting a king. He never asked again whose it was. He simply decided, and the world bent. But some things don't bend. They break. It started with the letters. Plain envelopes. No return address. Delivered by hand to the gate. Inside, photographs. Me in New Orleans. Me leaving the bar with the green-eyed man. Me the morning after, walking alone, hand pressed to my still flat stomach like I already knew. The last letter contained a single line in handwriting I didn't recognize. She was never yours to keep. Luca read it once, then he burned it. Then he made 3 phone calls. 2 days later, the green-eyed man disappeared. His name had been Daniel. He was a schoolteacher. He had a dog named Max and a mother with Alzheimer's. They found what was left of him in a dumpster behind a church. His eyes were gone. Luca came home that night, washed the blood off in the shower, and crawled into bed beside me. He held me so tight I couldn't breathe. "I fixed it," he whispered. I didn't ask how. I already knew. The next letter came with a finger. Not Daniel's. A child's, pink nail polish. Tiny silver ring shaped like a star. Luca went very, very still. Then he left the house and didn't come back for 6 days. When he returned, his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He walked straight to me, fell to his knees, and buried his face in my lap. "They have my sister," he said. I froze. Luca didn't have a sister. Everyone knew that. The Rossi family had 3 sons. One crowned prince, dead in the car bomb that wasn't. One spare who overdosed at 19. One bastard daughter no one acknowledged. Luca's father had kept her locked in a convent in Sicily since birth. A secret shame. A leverage point no one was supposed to know existed. Someone knew. They wanted the child I carried. They wanted Luca on his knees. They wanted everything. He looked up at me with eyes that had gone dead again. "I will give them anything," he said. "Anything except you." Then he kissed my stomach like an apology. That night he armed the house like a fortress. Men on every corner. Dogs with fresh blood still on their teeth. Windows replaced with bulletproof glass. He stopped sleeping. He started praying, in Latin, on his knees beside the bed, hands clasped so tight the knuckles went white. I watched him unravel thread by thread. On the 7th night, I found him in the nursery. He sat in the rocking chair, staring at the empty crib. In his lap was a tiny onesie, black with a tiny silver crest embroidered over the heart. He was crying again, silent this time. I walked over and took it from his hands. "I have a plan," I said. He looked up. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered in his eyes. I told him. Everything. The tunnels I'd mapped. The guards I'd bribed with sex and secrets. The boat waiting at the old dock. The passports in the lining of my old wedding dress, the one he'd burned, but I'd cut the lining out first. I told him we would run. Not from him. With him. All 3 of us. He listened without moving. When I finished, he stood and cupped my face. "You would leave everything," he said. "For me." "I already did," I answered. "The night I fed a homeless man half a sandwich." He kissed me like the world was ending. Then he made love to me on the floor of the nursery, slow and desperate and reverent, whispering mine, mine, mine against my skin like a talisman. Afterward, he held me and said, "Tomorrow night, new moon again. They'll be watching the roads, not the water." I nodded. We fell asleep in the rocking chair, tangled together, his hand over the place where our child, his child, always his, grew. I dreamed of green eyes and screaming. I woke to gunfire. The first bullet took the nursery window at 3:12 a.m. Glass exploded inward like frozen rain. Luca was already moving, naked, gun in hand before I even registered the sound. He threw me to the floor, covered me with his body, and roared a single word in Italian that made every man in the house wake up screaming. Then the lights died. Not cut. Killed. The entire estate plunged into absolute black. I heard boots on marble, doors splintering, men dying in the hallways with gurgled prayers. Luca dragged me up by the wrist, pressed a pistol into my hand, and put his mouth to my ear. "Tunnels," he said. "Now." I was already running. We moved like smoke, bare feet silent, breathing synced. He knew every shadow. I knew every creak. Down the servants' stairs, past the pantry, into the false wall I'd shown him weeks ago, when I still thought I'd leave alone. The tunnel swallowed us. Behind us the house burned. I smelled gasoline and gunpowder and blood. Luca didn't look back. He just pulled me deeper into the dark. We ran until my lungs bled, until the tunnel spat us out at the old boathouse on the lake. The boat was there, a black cigarette racer, engine already warm. A single man waited at the helm. I recognized him. The guard I'd bribed with whispered promises in the wine cellar. The one who'd sworn his sister was sick and needed money for treatment. He smiled when he saw me. Then he raised his gun. Luca shot him between the eyes before I could scream. The body hit the water with a soft splash. Luca stepped over it like it was nothing, lifted me into the boat, and gunned the engine. We tore across the lake under a moonless sky. I clung to the rail, 8 months pregnant and shaking so hard my teeth chattered. Luca drove one-handed, the other pressed to my stomach like he could shield the baby from the world with his palm. Halfway across, the sky lit up behind us. The house, our house, exploded in a bloom of orange and black. He didn't flinch. I did. He looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time since the alley, since the sandwich, since the first time he said my name like a threat, I saw fear in his eyes, not of dying, of losing me. I reached for him. He let go of the wheel long enough to crush me against his chest. The boat veered, almost capsized. He didn't care. We kissed like the world was already ash. When we broke apart, he pressed his forehead to mine. "Whatever happens," he said, "you are my wife. That child is my child, and I will kill God himself before I let anyone take you from me again." Then he straightened, took the wheel, and drove us into the night. We made landfall at a private dock 2 hours later. A car waited, black, no plates, keys under the mat. Luca carried me from the boat because my legs had forgotten how to work. He laid me in the back seat, covered me with his jacket, and drove. I don't remember much after that. Just the sound of his voice counting miles like rosary beads. Just his hand on my thigh, grounding me. Just the taste of blood and lake water, and goodbye. I woke in a cabin. Wood smoke and pine and silence so deep it hurt. Luca sat beside the bed, unshaven, eyes red. He was holding my hand like he'd been afraid to let go, even in sleep. When he saw I was awake, he smiled. Small, broken, perfect. "We're safe," he said. I looked around. No guards, no cameras, just windows full of snow and mountains I didn't recognize. "Where are we?" "Somewhere they'll never look." He touched my stomach. "It's time," he said softly. I hadn't realized I was in labor until that moment. The pain came in waves that bent me in half. Luca caught me, held me, breathed with me. There was no doctor. Just him. Just us. Just the storm outside and the storm inside. He delivered our daughter himself. Tiny. Perfect. Screaming like she already knew the world was cruel. He wrapped her in his shirt, still stained with someone else's blood, and laid her on my chest. She had his mouth, my eyes, and a crescent-shaped birthmark on her left shoulder blade, exactly where my scar was. Luca saw it. He went very still. Then he started to laugh, quiet, reverent, terrified. He kissed the mark like it was holy. Then he kissed me. "I told you," he whispered. "Mine." We named her Lucia. After the light he swore he'd never deserved. We stayed in that cabin for 3 months. No phones, no names. Just snow and firewood and a baby who learned to smile at monsters. Luca learned to change diapers with the same hands that had once snapped necks. He sang to her in Sicilian, lullabies about drowned sailors and vengeful saints. He never left the cabin at night. He never left at all. One morning in early spring, I woke to find him standing at the window. Snow melting outside. Sunrise bleeding across the mountains. He held Lucia against his chest, her tiny fist curled in his shirt. He was crying again. I walked up behind him, wrapped my arms around them both. "What is it?" I asked. He turned. In his free hand was a letter. Plain envelope. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. Me. In the greenhouse. Kneeling in the dirt the night I told him about the baby. Taken from above. Someone had been watching. On the back, in handwriting I now recognized, "Welcome to forever, brother." Luca looked at me, then at our daughter, then at the endless white outside. He smiled, slow, sharp, beautiful. "Let them come," he said. He kissed Lucia's head, kissed my mouth. Then he walked to the fireplace and threw the letter into the flames. We watched it burn. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the 3 of us stayed warm. Because some stories don't end with escape. Some stories end with choosing the devil you know. Some stories end with a homeless man who became a king. And a girl who learned that the most dangerous place in the world was the only place she ever truly belonged. If you liked the story, drop a comment for part 2, and don't forget to subscribe to Mara's Betrayal.